YouTube, how's it going? The GOAT House is back, and we're a week away until NFL free agency officially begins here in the 2021 offseason. In today's video, I got 20 trade scenarios, and each of those trade scenarios has a final prediction with it. All of these guys have been, involved in trade discussions. A lot of these names came out actually earlier today that teams have either called or their current team is trying to shop these guys. So a lot to talk about here. So this is surrounding guys that are surrounded in rumors here. So we'll talk about this, break it all down. We'll see if any of these happen. We got plenty of NFL offseason content on the channel. Plenty more to come. Covering free agency and the NFL draft fully. We'll grade every single big trade and every single free agency signing once it gets going here. So join us for that. Subscribe, turn notifications on, smash that like button. Follow our Twitter if you want that instant news or instant takeaways from that news and maybe predictions, anything you can think of. Go to that Twitter at GoatHouseNFL. Give us a follow. Be much appreciated. Link in the comments and description for anything that you need. You see underneath me, walkthemock.com. It's what we use for our member mock drafts. It's a one-of-a-kind simulator. If you're going to sign up, please use our code GOATHOUSE. It would help yourself out, help myself out as well, so I appreciate that. Here's our Twitter, just constantly talking news. Lamarcus Joyner was about to be in this video, but he got cut as we projected here, so just a lot of talk, about anything you can think of NFL-wise. Don't mind the order of, how we go about this, but some Saints players have been brought up in terms of trade talks, and a lot of these guys I brought up as potential trade candidates. So Emmanuel Sanders brought up, he potentially could get cut, potentially could be traded because the Saints do want to clear that space. It's not a whole lot of space, just under $10 million. So they could try to trade him. I thought a pretty good fit would be the Colts, maybe replacing T.Y. Hilton while getting cheaper, because I think T.Y. Hilton would draw a little more money. And remember, Hilton play was he was third in snaps for the Colts receivers last year. So I don't know if they want to pay him big money. So maybe like a cheaper version of T.Y. Hilton here. But at the end of the day, I think the Saints, do they really want to cut him? No, but they're desperate for some space. He's got a little injury concern. Maybe he's not quite the same, even though he's still, he's still got that speed. He can still play. He can get the separation. I think eventually he's cut. I don't know if a team, would they could trade for him, but would actually trade for him knowing that he may be cut. But, if he was traded, I'd see around a 6th or 7th round pick, and I would like the Colts as well. That makes sense to me. But at the end of the day, my prediction is he eventually gets cut just to free that space up. Another Saints player, Kwan Alexander, who they traded for, during the season, and that was kind of a rental. That was kind of we're going to rent him because he's got no dead cap when we need cap space, which is right now. And that they were going to use him in their playoff run, Super Bowl run. And it kind of made sense, but the worst thing possible happened. He got hurt, so they can't really officially cut him now. But then there's been talks around, him, and he's got a pretty big cap hit. It was around 13 point something, 13.2, 13.3 cap hit. So a team's got to have a lot of cap space. The Browns have a decent amount. They need a linebacker. So I like the fit there. I just don't see a trade happening. Trade for an injured-prone linebacker with a big cap hit. I just don't see it happening. I think the Saints are going to wait until they can cut him, and they'll cut him. And I'm pretty confident on that. So, I really don't think anybody's going to trade for him. But I thought the Browns were an interesting fit, and his name has come up. I think it's more so the Saints are out there kind of looking, hey, do you want to trade for this guy? Worth a shot. Another Saints player that, name that got brought up actually earlier today was Latavius Murray. I don't know if anybody's out there, dying to have Latavius Murray, so that's why I don't think he ends up being traded. So none of these guys I don't think end up being traded. And the Saints end up keeping him. They would save over $2 million cutting him. I know they need cap space. I know they're kind of in that desperation mode, but I mean, do you need to cut him and save $2 million? Then you're going to find a replacement running back to pair with Kamara. That's not going to be that much cheaper, maybe later in the draft, but it's less than $2 million, but it doesn't seem worth it to me. A team that's looking for maybe a running back to give a load to, but not the full load. Maybe the Jets would pair him with Pirine, perhaps. I just don't see the trade happening. But the Saints could cut him, so watch out for that. But it would make a lot more sense if they kind of just held on to him. So we'll see what happens there. Next, Geno Atkins' name got brought up. We talked about him being a cut candidate. We actually talked about him being a trade deadline candidate at the trade deadline halfway through the year. We talked about him being a cut candidate because it's a lot of money there. $12 million for the team that trades for him. So that's why it's tough. And the Patriots are looking to kind of revamp their defensive line. It's been pretty poor there up front. So I think they would like to have a guy like Geno Atkins. A team like the Chargers may like to have him. A team like the Raiders, the Cowboys. So there's several teams here. It's tough because his value probably more than a 5th-round pick. But then at the same time, would a team want to trade for $12 million cap hit, for a guy that was just kind of injured? And that's why I don't think they're going to find a trade partner. I think it's another guy that ends up being cut, and the Bengals are going to save that money and look to get younger, more athletic there, I suppose. So, yeah, another one that it's all about the leverage and all about, do you want to take in the cap hit? And a lot of these guys, I don't think teams really want to. I don't know if they're, dying to have a guy that much. Geno Atkins still could be a pretty good player, though. Next, Michael Brockers. Now, here's one I actually think could be traded. The Rams would like to keep him, though. Pretty good player next to Aaron Donald there, opposite of Aaron Donald on the defensive line. Key for them. They got him back last offseason, so they would like to keep him, but there's a lot of cap space there to be saved if they trade him. I don't think they're just going to flat out cut him. They're trying to get better in some other spots there for Matt Stafford and company, so they could move on from him. There's been some trade talks around him. I like the Chargers a lot. I like the Ravens. Remember last offseason, the Ravens actually had an agreement in place to sign Michael Brockers for a 3-year, $30 million contract. That's $10 million per year if you're doing your math at home. And then he agreed to that, but then the Rams came along, hey, we'll give you $24 million in 3 years. So that's $6 million less total, and he took that to stay home. And the Ravens really, they really liked him. They had a fit for him. They end up getting Derek Wolfe instead for that position. So the Ravens, I still think they have a plan for him. They obviously like him. And if they would trade for him, it would actually be cheaper in that contract they were trying to get him for last offseason. So the Ravens make a ton of sense because Derek Wolfe is a free agent as well. I think Jacksonville makes a lot of sense as well. Patriots. I like the Chargers, though. Brandon Staley, who was the Rams defensive coordinator, is now the head coach of the Chargers running that defense. And, the argument against this, Tillery, a lot of upside. Maybe they work with him. Maybe they see some upside there, so maybe they'll hold off. But he's been a little underwhelming. Brockers, familiar with the scheme and a big-time player there. Opposite of playing opposite side of Joey Bosa, should have a pretty good amount of production too. So I actually think the Chargers will push for this. I think the Ravens probably be the favorites. But they don't have a 3rd-round pick in the trade for Ngakoue. If the Ravens offer that 2nd-round pick, they're going to get him. They're going to get him. But they need pass rushers. They may need to replace that Derek Wolfe spot like this. They need offensive linemen. They need receivers, and then they need to keep that 2nd-round pick along with their 1st-round pick, of course. But they could get something for Orlando Brown. So that's where things got really interesting. We're going to talk about Orlando Brown. If they get something for Orlando Brown, could that be used or help them feel comfortable about going for Michael Brockers? So I really like the Ravens. I was back and forth on this. So if something happens with Brown first, maybe that spikes the potential Brockers to the Ravens. Again, maybe they're a little salty about him turning them down, but I don't think they'd be that pissed about it. I think the Chargers like him. Again, Ravens, Jags, Patriots, teams like that. I think it happens. I think the Rams looking to clear that space, but I don't see at the same time, it makes sense to keep him as well. But because you're clearing that space, you're opening up another hole. Are you getting worse? Or, who are you getting to replace? They're pretty far in the negative. They should restructure some contracts to clear that space. So it's pretty interesting. I just think the Chargers will show a lot of interest, among other teams. Next, Eagles offensive guard Brandon Brooks. Getting some trade talks as well. The Eagles feels like they're kind of going in rebuild mode. I think the Jets would be interested here. Bengals, Jaguars, Seahawks. A lot of these teams, should be pretty interested in a guy like Brandon Brooks. So Chargers as well. So those teams I named, they're all pretty even there. I picked out the Jets. I think it's a pretty good fit. It's going to be that LaFleur scheme. And the Jets have the load of picks, so they may be able to offer something. Again, Jacksonville does as well. Some of those teams. They can be willing to offer this because they have enough picks, but that would make sense. It's a tough one too because he's a very good guard, like maybe the best in football, one of the best in football. If he's on the field, he's had anxiety issues in the past. Last year, injury before the year even started. So I'm predicting he stays with the Eagles just because I don't see how two sides could agree on something and with involving Brandon Brooks. because I think the Eagles are going to need a second-round pick to be able to move on from him. I don't think they're going to accept the third, and teams might have a hard time of offering that second. They could, but they may want to offer a third plus because he did have the injuries, what's surrounding his past. So it's a tough one. I just don't know if teams could come to an agreement on this one, but he's a very good guard if he's healthy, if he's on the field. So definitely an interesting one. I just don't think the Eagles are just ready to just get rid of him, I think they would very much like to keep him around. Would be over $10 million cap hit for the team trading for him too. Keep in mind, we're going to see a decent amount of the same teams because it's all about the available cap space as well. Next, the Eagles, we know they're going to trade Zach Ertz or cut him. I think they find a trade partner here. He's going to be around an $8.25 million cap hit for his new team. The Patriots make sense to me. They've been missing Gronk, I guess, and they've been trying to fill that hole. They draft, a bunch of them every year, it feels like, a bunch of tight ends. Doesn't seem to work out. So I think a guy like Zach Ertz, okay, enough messing around with these maybe guys, these question mark guys. Let's go out and get a guy like Zach Ertz. That would make sense to me, and then figure out your quarterback situation. I guess maybe that's holding off on it. Maybe like, well, we're going to waste our time doing this if we don't have a quarterback lined up. I guess that would be the reason against it. And it seems like his value is going down, almost by the day. The Eagles probably should have traded him already. It'd been ideal to trade him at the trade deadline if they could have. He did have the injuries pop up then, so that was unfortunate. But yeah, I think around a fifth round pick, start to talk about maybe he gets cut. I still think a trade happens, but I am predicting to what my scenario isn't here. I'm thinking he still goes to the Colts. That was my prediction not too long ago. I thought him and Wentz together can go to the Colts in the same trade. They hold off on that. The Eagles are trying to collect some more offers. I still think he goes to the Colts. Why my scenarios is Patriots. Again, finally the Patriots get the guy that's, established. That makes sense. I don't know if I really think it's a great idea for the Colts to do this. The positive is Ertz is familiar with that scheme. He's familiar with the quarterback. And he would thrive in that scheme. He'd be a good ball player. It would help the Colts in a way. Of course, Zach Ertz is a really good tight end. But why I don't really necessarily, think they, by me saying it's not a great idea doesn't mean it's a bad idea, of course. But, they really got their tight end trio going last year. And I think it'd be cheaper to kind of keep that band together and, on a per year basis than, prioritize this. You're trading for this guy. You're paying, you get an $8.25 million cap hit. He's going to want an extension on top of that. You got a bunch of other guys that, you got to extend. So there's more reasons why it doesn't really make much sense. If you're desperate for tight end, you need to trade for him. But I like the unit they had last year. Again, it could be cheaper to keep, all three of those guys together still. So, but I, just got the feeling that the Colts end up with them. But I'd recommend maybe not. But he's going to be good if he's on the Colts, of course. So it's not like a win-loss situation, I guess. So we'll see what happens with Ertz. I think we all expect a trade to go down there. Next, definitely an interesting one here. Patriots, 49ers. Stephon Gilmore was centered around trade talks at the trade deadline. I think that was overhyped that, there was teams probably calling and the Patriots weren't just not answering the phone. They were answering it, but people kind of made it out to be he's going to get traded because the Patriots answered the phone. And that wasn't the case, but there is talks again. I don't know how involved the Patriots are, how willing they are to trade. But the Niners got a load of free agent cornerbacks, and the Patriots have a certain quarterback or the Niners have a certain quarterback the Patriots may be interested in, once had in Jimmy Garoppolo. So we can make an interesting deal, swapping Jimmy Garoppolo for Stephon Gilmore. Garoppolo has a little bit of an injury concern. I think that's why the Niners are scrambling to look for guys. They're looking at guys that aren't as good as Jimmy Garoppolo right now, in my opinion. So that tells me they're not 100% confident with his health, maybe, and they're looking for ways to maybe get better for the future at the same time. Makes sense. So I think they'll be willing to move on from him, but on top of that injury concern, he doesn't have a whole bunch of value, and he has a pretty big cap hit as well. So his value really isn't there. Gilmore has a smaller cap hit, under $10 million, which is fantastic for maybe the best corner in football. So, Jimmy Garoppolo and a second-round pick to the Patriots makes some sense. The Niners get Stephon Gilmore. They clear that cap space of Jimmy Garoppolo, and they search for their quarterback. Of course, they may have to have a plan in place for them to be willing to do this, but getting a guy like Gilmore could be could be appealing enough, and then to extend him long-term. This is a big one. A lot has to happen for this to happen. So my prediction is the Patriots keep Gilmore. I don't know if they really are dying to trade him. They're just kind of accepting calls. That's kind of my prediction on this situation right now, kind of like it was the trade deadline. Patriots are getting a bunch of opt-out guys back. They believe they can win if they just find a quarterback. That they believe that defense can get back to top tier, which it's understandable why they would think that. And then taking away Gilmore kind of disrupts that, so that doesn't make a whole bunch of sense. I think they keep him, and they may extend him as well while they're at it. So definitely an interesting scenario, though, that is realistic, but I still think even though it's realistic, it's kind of a long shot at the same time. Next. So how could they deal with their quarterback situation? It could be Sam Darnold. It's up in the air what he's going to get traded for. There was rumors about, second-round pick. The Jets could be they could be losing leverage. At one point it was like, hold off on the trades because make teams get desperate. But I think some teams are going to go elsewhere, finding, somebody's going to sign Winston, whether he's back in the Saints or not. Somebody's going to get some of those other free agents, trade for Marcus Mariota. And then the leverage, I think, starts to go down. So it's kind of smart for the Jets, but if they hang on too long and the leverage starts going down, his value starts to go down a little bit. But based on the way he's played, I wouldn't really trade a whole bunch for him. So fourth-round pick makes sense. I don't know if I would even do that if it was me, but that's probably what's going to happen. I think Niners, it's appealing for the Niners because they could, if they do end up with Garoppolo still, which I don't know if they have any takers, and if they find a replacement, then they can cut Garoppolo, but finding replacements another problem, I guess, another task there. And they can get Darnold. He actually can sit for a year behind Garoppolo, maybe take over the spot. But if Garoppolo gets injured, not healthy, then Darnold takes over there. So that would make sense to me. Other teams kind of involved for Darnold sounds like Washington and the Bears. But it just doesn't make sense to me. It feels like those teams are taking a step backwards or, at best staying the same what their quarterback situation was before. And those teams are trying to win right now. Of course, the Niners are trying to win right now, but that would be with Jimmy Garoppolo, whoever starting quarterback would be. They would kind of get Darnold under that Shanahan mold and get him ready for the very near future. That would make sense to me. So, and I'm actually predicting that too. I think the feeling around the league is that the Jets are taking quarterback at number 2 overall, which makes a lot of sense there. So, I'm going to go with the Niners in that prediction. We'll see what happens. David Njoku back with the trade talks, trade rumors. You can't escape it. I think the Jags would make some sense. I think they're looking for an athletic tight end out there for this new offense they're about to have. And I'm actually going to predict that. He could go – I would like the Bengals, but, same division. I don't know if they could. It's a smaller trade. I don't know if the Browns help out a division rival. Maybe Seattle. New England, you got to throw in there, of course. You always got to throw in the Colts, seems like that. But the Jacksonville makes sense as a fit, so I think it can happen. Somewhere around a 6th-round pick. I think he has a little more talent than, it's a 6th-round pick, but they just keep on trying to trade him. So I think the leverage is kind of lost a little bit, so 6th or 7th there. Again, I think it's a good fit there with Jacksonville. They moved on from Eifert as well. Little bit different style tight end, but get more of the athletic guy. And they're in position in the draft to maybe not focus on the tight end, in the high spot, so they get a solid player for a cheap cost here. Makes sense. Next, Preston Smith of the Packers. We kind of thought maybe he gets traded because they kind of want to have Rashawn Gary step in that spot opposite of Zadarius Smith, and Preston Smith was a little underwhelming, to say the least, last year. And it kind of got the feeling they weren't just going to outright cut him because he's still a pretty good talent, So it was a possible trade candidate. Then it kind of came out that that they may want to keep him. They still like him, but that was trying to kind of gain that leverage a little bit. And now he's involved in trade talks again. I think there's a long list of teams that could use him. He's going to be a $12 million cap hit for whoever trades for him. So that's a bit pricey, but it's an edge rusher. And at the same time, the guys in free agency are going to cost 14, 15, maybe up to 18 million. So the teams that missed out on one of those guys or can't or don't want to spend that much money, they go ahead and trade for Preston Smith. I think he's a good fit with the Jets, Titans, Chargers, Ravens. There's a lot of teams he's a really, really good fit for, those teams that I named there. And I thought the Browns, makes sense. Kind of replacing Olivier Vernon makes a lot of sense. I think a team that has a guy that could help create for him a little bit, they'd feel a little more comfortable. So Myles Garrett in this case. I don't think a trade's going to happen. They'll very well could. It's kind of 50-50, but, in that range. But I think his value would be 4th round. I think the Packers, if they get a 4th round offer, they may accept it. If they get less than a 4th round offer, if they get a 3rd round, which is possible because I do think he's talented still. It's interesting because I thought he was a little, based on his stats in 2019, I thought people were going a little too crazy. And I was trying to tell people, is Zadarius Smith kind of created for this guy? Preston Smith deserves a lot of credit, but I think too many people were basing off his stats. He was a little overhyped. But now, because he had an off year, I think people are getting on him too much. I think people are talking about cutting him. I wouldn't outright cut this guy, unless you're really close to making a big-time move and you need that space desperately, maybe. But yeah, kind of going back to the value, if the Packers aren't going to accept, in my opinion, they're not going to accept a 5th-round pick. And I don't know if a team would offer a 4th because it is a $12 million cap hit. He didn't have a whole lot of production last year. They may just dive into free agency. Even if they miss on the little more expensive guys, they can go for a little bit of cheaper guy. Maybe Trey Hendrickson's around that range. So, but I would like him on the Browns. I talked about the Jets. I just listed off a bunch of teams. A lot of those teams make sense. But I don't think two teams, Packers being one, of course, because they have Preston Smith, can agree on the value. So I think the Packers keep Smith. At times, we've also seen them use 3 pass rushers at once because Zadarius Smith can kind of stand up on the inside or even go on the line there. So they could use the Smith bros, not related, and then Rashawn Gary all at the same time. So they still kind of like him. So we'll see what happens there. Chase Daniel, his name popped up. I'm thinking Chargers. There's some connections there with Joe Lombardi, who was with the Saints when Chase Daniel was there. And then you have Brandon Staley, who was with the Bears when Chase Daniel was with the Bears. They're really not that connected, though, because Staley was part of the defensive staff, but a familiar face, I suppose. It's mainly a guy like Joe Lombardi, and we hear that there could be a trade involving Chase Daniel. I would kind of wait till he's cut. It's not a guy. If you trade for a guy, I don't really care what pick it is. You kind of have to have him. So I don't know. I wouldn't really trade for him. But it sounds like a team that wants him as a mentor for their young quarterback. You got the Joe Lombardi connection. You got the, I suppose, Brandon Staley connection. And then you got Justin Herbert. You need a mentor for that. Tyrod Taylor was kind of that guy, and now he's on the way out. So there's things. I haven't heard anything about him going to the Chargers. This is kind of just a light bulb going off in my head. But the Dolphins would make sense because they're about to be missing Fitzpatrick, and they kind of like having him as a presence for Tua there. So maybe Daniel would be another option. So I really thought about the Dolphins as well, and I thought the Broncos kind of made some sense as well. But Chargers, for those reasons I explained, I think that actually happens too. 7th-round pick, I wouldn't trade any more than that. It might be a guy that gets cut anyways. We'll see. But definitely an interesting one because we were not expecting that one. Then Marcus Mariota. I've been saying Washington. I've also said New England and the Bears are possibilities. I kind of ranked them like that. Washington, New England, Chicago. I'm sticking with Washington. It keeps coming out that whoever the starting quarterback is going to be for Washington is not currently on the roster. We kind of knew that, but it keeps getting said. But no one's really linking somebody to Washington. I've been the only one really linking Mariota there. No one's really been, linking. I think fans linking Watson a little bit, but I think it's obviously unlikely. I've heard people linking Darnold a little bit. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I'd rather go Heineke. 100% rather go Heineke. It's kind of a step backwards, and I know even if you believe in Darnold, it's because you believe in the potential that he can still get to in the future. So it's still a step. Even either way, if you're on Darnold's side or not, you still believe it's kind of a step backwards right away, at least staying the same, or at best staying the same. So Mariota makes sense for that offense. I think a 4th-round pick makes sense. I was kind of predicting, why the trade talks kind of stopped. And I think the Raiders were asking for around a 3rd-round pick. And teams were probably offering maybe a 5th-round pick. I think they'll eventually meet in the middle. It kind of makes sense from both sides to where they started. The Raiders better not, I talked about this too, the Raiders better not get too cute with it though. By that I mean they better not wait around too long, because they're going to want to move on from him because they don't want to keep this $11 million cap hit as a backup quarterback, and eventually teams are going to start offering less and less if you're really waiting a long time. I don't think the Raiders are going to do that. I'm just saying watch out there. If they gain less than a 4th-round pick, if it's a 5th, and that's probably what happened, they kind of blew it at that point, but I guess at least they got something. But I am predicting that Washington football team trade here. We'll see what happens. Again, Patriots, Bears, watch out for teams like that. 49ers, maybe a wild card team there. We'll see. Next, Trent Brown, another Raiders guy here. How about the Bengals? I was talking about the Seahawks at one point. Seahawks might be interested in going for guards first. That might be more of the priority, maybe a center. They do have Damian Lewis, the only guy that's pretty much set there in the inside, young guy from LSU last year. So that they could go for him as well. I mean, a long list of teams we've talked about for Trent Brown. But maybe the Bengals. The Bengals pretty much need everything on the offensive line. They can, they might need 3-4 starters. So I'm basically, maybe they don't need all 5, but and so you're not going to get all that done in one offseason with free agency in the draft. But if you throw a trade in there, hey, maybe combining those 3 things, you might be able to do it here. Trent Brown's pretty good. They can use an upgrade at right tackle. Makes some sense. 3rd round pick around there. I still think it's up in the air. Another 50-51. The Raiders end up keeping him. They're not desperate, so they're not really losing leverage there. They're pretty much saying that they're going to trade him or keep him. They can't just cut this talent, so that makes sense. So the Raiders might ask for a 2nd-round pick, and they might not take this 3rd. I think teams would only offer a 3rd because he has the injury concern and is a $14 million cap hit. But there's a shortage on really good tackles. He's a really good tackle, and teams are kind of getting desperate. So maybe a team like the Bengals or whoever offers a 2nd-round pick. But I'm kind of thinking the Raiders kind of label it that's what they'll take. Teams might not offer that for the reasons I explained. So it's definitely one that's up in the air. So we'll see what happens there. Moving on to the next trade scenario. A couple guards. We'll talk about Trey Turner. Chargers made it clear they're going to try to trade him. They probably will cut him after, save a decent amount of money, $12 million there. And then I guess the problem with that is they pretty much need 4 offensive linemen then. I think the Lions were a good fit, maybe opposite of Jonah Jackson. I just don't think it happened. I don't think a trade happens with Trey Turner. So I wouldn't really focus on where I'd have him going in the scenario that much. I do think it's a good fit, but I think he ends up being cut. And if he does get traded, it's going to be for a late round. It's very late, 7th round pick, maybe a swap pick there. But again, I think he gets cut, and it's kind of the same trend here with a lot of these interior guys. Norwell would make sense for the Seahawks, but he's going to be was going to be a $12 million cap hit. It's too. The Seahawks did cut Carlos Dunlap, but to clear some space, but I don't know if they want to spend like pretty much all that on one guy here that's declined a little bit. I still think he could play, but it made sense. Norwell, the Seahawks, good fit in my opinion. 6th-round pick. It's probably less than his actually. It is. It's actually less than his value, but it's known they're going to trade him or cut him probably. I think he eventually ends up getting cut because teams, when they know he's going to get cut, we may have a chance on him for a lot cheaper than that hit we're about to get. It would make sense not to trade for him and take that hit that they would get. So, again, another guy I think they could get cut. And then Kevin Zeitler from the Giants. All these guards are in the same boat or on the same amount of cap hit too. And the Texans, it would be a good fit. They could be interested too to kind of retool that offensive line. And yeah, but the other guy I think gets cut. So pretty much around the same boat there, 6th-round pick. I think he could still play, so that's pretty good value. But teams may, again, think he's probably going to get cut. We can try to get him then, save a lot of money, save our draft pick. So that would make sense. A lot of those guys I just think are going to get cut. We will see. Next, Orlando Brown, who we had made a whole video on for him. In the past, we've talked about him a million times because we expect him to get traded because he wants to play left tackle. The Ravens want him at right tackle because they have Ronnie Stanley, one of the best in football. So he's going to be traded, basically. I've talked about I like the Jags. I like Washington football team a lot. I like the Colts, like the Chargers, and I like mainly those 4 teams, I'd say. And I'm going with the Jags. Now, I'm sticking with that prediction. Again, I think a swap pick makes a lot of sense. I've talked about that with Washington. Chargers, that's too much. Chargers don't want to give up that 13th pick, even if it means keeping the first. So I don't think that happens. Washington or Colts could be swapping with the Ravens, swapping 1st-round picks, and that could get the job done. But the Jags have the 25th pick. I think they'd be willing to offer that for him to start at left tackle for them. Off that 25th pick, and that might beat the swap deal. Those teams might not offer the swap deal. They might offer a package of 2nd round or 2nd round, 3rd, whatever it may be. But the Jacksonville Jaguars are kind of in the prime spot to make it happen. If they don't get him, it's probably because they didn't offer the 25th pick. So that would help the other teams out a lot. So that's kind of my prediction. I thought the swap deals, we talked about those potential swap deals. I thought they were pretty cool, and it's a pretty good idea. It makes a lot of sense actually, even though swap deals are rare, I thought they made a lot of sense. So Jags just make too much sense there. Just makes too much sense. Probably better than what they would get 25th overall. Ravens they have 25, 27 then. That's fantastic. They can either go replacement and pass rusher, replacement and receiver, in the 1st round. Something along those lines. Next, Whitney Merciless. The Texans, we'll see if they view him as a fit or not. But for me, Lovie Smith's scheme, I don't really view him as a fit. He's been a little underwhelming on top of that. They can't cut him. So they could trade another one where it's going to be just over a $10 million cap hit, and you would rather have some of the guys in free agency, but you may miss out on those guys in free agency, or they're going to cost too much, where you could trade for a guy like Merciless. It's a little cheaper. Maybe he's not as good, but it is a little cheaper. I view him as a fit in Robert Saleh's scheme there in the Jets. I think he can fit Seattle. I think he can fit, a lot of these teams. Chargers, Ravens, if the Ravens let Yannick Ngakoue walk, teams like that. But it made a lot of sense for the Jets in terms of the scenario around a 5th-round pick, probably max, because the Texans are just, again, they can't cut him because it would be negative. It would be a loss in cap space, I should say. So lose a little bit of leverage there if they get really desperate, so it could be less than a 5th-round pick. But at the end of the day, I think Houston still ends up with Whitney Merciless because teams may be cautious to spend, even though it's a less cap hit than some of these free agents. He's kind of a question mark on his talent level at these days. So they may not do it there, and the Texans can't cut him. So I think most likely he ends up back with the Texans. And the last one, the 20th trade scenario, Kyle Van Noy, it sounded like he was going to be cut, and then they're going to hold off because most likely teams called and said, yeah, we might want to trade for him. It could have been, they may not have cut him and then changed their mind. It could have been, people kind of getting the information that they probably will cut him if they can't trade him, and they end up reporting that he was cut. So who knows? It could be either or. There's quite a few good fits we've talked about. It could end up back in the Patriots. We talked about him on Twitter. Some solid fits. Browns, I thought Washington was an interesting one. Titans makes a lot of sense there. So I think that'd be a pretty good trade there. But again, he's going to be cut anyway. So where do you value him too? I think he's a talented player. His talent says much better in 5th round, but you're knowing he's going to be cut. So is it going to be cheaper in that? It's really tough to predict. So got to split the difference there a little bit, maybe on the back end a little more. But the Titans would make sense. I think they'll show interest. But it is pretty expensive. They have to clear some space. I think he kind of fits in. They've been running kind of a hybrid defense where somebody off the edge, 50-50, dropping coverage, rush the passer. And they've been having guys that just it doesn't make a lot of sense. Harold Landry, which I think he's decent at dropping coverage, but I think he needs to be rushing the passer more because I think he's a good pass rusher. And sometimes they have Rashaan Evans doing that, which I think he's just like an inside linebacker. So they kind of got guys doing things that really isn't ideal for them, and they have them doing what Kyle Van Noy does on a game-by-game basis. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it would help those other guys out. I think he ends up getting cut, though, because teams may know he's going to get cut, and it's pretty damn expensive at the same time with his contract. So I think he ends up getting cut, and again, he can end up that's a thing, though. That's probably why the Titans would actually trade for him, because if he got cut, you would think he probably ends up back in the Patriots. He probably ends up, I think most of us would say that. I mean, Titans are pretty appealing, but he probably ends up back in the Patriots. Titans probably know that. They may think, if we want this guy, which is a really, really good fit, we're gonna have to trade for him. So I'm not really changing my mind, but I'm almost talking myself into it. The Titans actually might trade for him on a 5th, 6th round pick. I love the fit. It's a lot of money, but if you want him, yeah, you might have to. So that might be why. Some people kind of questioning why would a team do it, and it could be more than the Titans. Again, I listed off some other teams. Those teams know if he hits free agency, he's probably he wants to go back to the Patriots. They're going to offer. So yeah, kind of talking myself into maybe changing that a little bit, but that's tough. I still think teams may take their chances. They know he's going to be cut, so it's going to be interesting. I'm sure other names will pop up as in serious trade discussions. Free agency starts. Really, it starts next Wednesday, but we start hearing news on Monday. But sometimes you have guys back out of deals. I think Michael Brockers last year, Anthony Barr did it before. So don't celebrate signings too much, but Monday is going to be a lot of fun. Remember, DeAndre Hopkins got traded on what was Monday compared to this year's Monday. So a lot will happen. We'll have you covered for all of it instantly on our Twitter, and then we'll cover it all on here. Every free agency signing graded here, any big trade graded, any latest rumors, predictions. We got everything. We got everything here, even the NFL draft when that's coming up. Cannot wait. Smash that like button, subscribe, join us for that content. Turn notifications on so you don't miss any of it. And again, follow that Twitter link in the comments section there, pinned in the comments for anything that you need. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.